The United States government is sitting on $37 trillion of debt, the biggest debt pile any nation has ever accumulated, larger than the entire world's annual economic output just 2 decades ago. And here's the part almost no one is brave enough to say out loud. They have zero intention of paying it back. Not through a default, not through heavy spending cuts, not through tax hikes. Their real plan? To vaporize it. Not instantly, not openly, but through a slow, engineered, carefully disguised demolition of the dollar's value. A quiet siphoning of purchasing power from every person who holds or earns in dollars. And the tool they're using is something most people believe is independent of government influence: crypto and gold. Right now, you are watching the US government deploy the most advanced debt-erasing blueprint ever attempted. They are constructing a parallel financial architecture, building reserves in Bitcoin and gold, and preparing to reset the value of those assets to many multiples of their current prices. And by doing that, they can mathematically offset a debt that cannot be repaid. But here's the part that should keep you up at night. When they push gold and Bitcoin upward, they drag the dollar downward. Your dollars shrink in value. Your bonds melt. Your savings decay. You're about to be legally looted, slowly, smoothly, silently. And most people won't notice until they're already broke. In this breakdown, I'm going to show you exactly how the mechanism works. Not speculation, not theories. The real machinery behind debt destruction using asset revaluation. You'll see the historical precedents because this strategy has been used several times before. You'll see what the US is doing right now. Executive orders, hidden Bitcoin stockpiles, gold acquisitions. And you'll see the timeline, how soon this hits, how fast it will unfold, and what you must do before the window closes. Because this isn't a faraway possibility. It's already happening. And once the switch is flipped, there is no undo button. Let's begin with a truth most people don't grasp. Government debt is not like personal debt. If you owe money, you must repay it with real effort, work, savings, assets. Governments don't play by those rules. They control the currency, and whoever controls the currency controls the scoreboard. When you control the scoreboard, you can change the numbers. You can redefine what a dollar is worth. You can reprice the assets on your balance sheet. You can make debt disappear without actually repaying it. This is called a monetary reset, and it has happened many times. Take 1933. The US was suffocating under World War I debt and a crushing depression. Debt to GDP was climbing. Deflation was destroying wages, profits, and production. So President Roosevelt made a radical move. He didn't pay the debt. He repriced the money. Back then, gold cost 20 to 60 cents per ounce, a price that had held firm since the late 1800s. The dollar was defined by gold. Your money was literally a claimed check on physical metal. But the government was broke. So Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102. Americans were forced to hand their gold to the government, exchanged at the official price of $20.67. After the government collected the gold, they changed the rules. They revalued gold to $35 per ounce, a 69% jump overnight. That single number change created billions in new government asset value instantly. On paper, their gold jumped from $4 billion to nearly $7 billion. By doing that, the government reduced its debt burden dramatically without paying anything back. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans who handed in their gold watched the government flip the price upward, but they couldn't benefit from it because private gold ownership was banned. Their savings, held in dollars, simply lost purchasing power over time due to the inflation that followed. This was wealth transfer disguised as policy. And it worked. And now the same playbook is resurfacing. But this time, the scale is unimaginable. Today, the U.S. debt is $37 trillion. Debt to GDP is 132%, higher than during most of World War II. Interest payments alone are $1.2 trillion. If interest rates stay anywhere near current levels, that number jumps to nearly $1.8 trillion by 2027. Just interest, not principal. This is mathematically impossible to sustain. The Treasury knows it. The Fed knows it. Congress knows it. You can't tax your way out. You can't grow your way out. You can't cut spending enough. There's only one tool left: devalue the dollar. But printing money openly is too obvious. Inflation becomes undeniable. Confidence collapses. They need a cleaner trick, a more elegant escape. That brings us to Bitcoin and gold. On January 23, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve, a digital counterpart to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Officially, this was framed as an innovation play, a national competitiveness move, a way to keep America ahead of China. But beneath the surface, it's a debt strategy. The U.S. government already holds around 210,000 BTC, mostly seized from criminal operations. At $100 per coin, that's about $21 billion. Nice, but small compared to $37 trillion of debt. But the executive order isn't about their existing stash. It's about what they plan to accumulate. Senator Cynthia Lummis introduced a proposal for the U.S. to accumulate 1 million Bitcoin over 5 years. At current prices, that would cost around $100 billion, but they're not planning to buy it the normal way. The government is scooping up Bitcoin through seizures, regulatory fines, penalties, and possibly even mining operations. Quietly, unnoticed, without triggering a price explosion. Why? Because the goal isn't to acquire Bitcoin at 100K, it's to acquire Bitcoin before they revalue it. Imagine this, by 2028, the US holds 1,000 BTC. Then they announce, open quote, for strategic reserve accounting purposes, Bitcoin is valued at $1,000 per coin, close quote. A 10x revaluation through policy alone. That instantly turns their $120 billion investment into a $1 trillion asset. And once the US sets that price floor, the market chases it. Bitcoin surges toward 300K, then 500K, then 800K, moving toward the new benchmark. But as Bitcoin is revalued upward, the dollar is being revalued downward. It's the same event, two sides of the same coin, and Bitcoin is only half the plan. The government also holds over 8,100 tons of gold, roughly 261 million ounces. At today's price, around $2,800, those reserves are worth about $731 billion. But on the government's official accounting books, they are valued at $42.22 per ounce, a comically outdated number from 1973. On paper, the U.S. gold reserve is worth just $11 billion. This gap between reality and the books is deliberate. It gives them room for another massive revaluation. If they declare a new reserve valuation of, say, $20,000 per ounce, the U.S. instantly generates over $5 trillion in balance sheet value. Combine that with the Bitcoin revaluation, and they've created roughly $6+ trillion in artificial asset value, without printing a dollar, without raising taxes, without cutting spending. But this comes at a cost. The dollar gets crushed. Gold pumping from $2,800 to $20,000 is equivalent to the dollar losing 85% of its value relative to gold. Bitcoin rising from 100K to $1 million means the dollar loses 90% of its value relative to BTC. And regular Americans, they feel it at the grocery store, at the gas pump, in rent, in utilities. Because if the dollar loses 80 to 90% against hard assets, it loses 50 to 70% in everyday life. A person with $100,000 in savings sees it functionally shrink to the buying power of 30 to 40 CAR within a few years. Meanwhile, the government's real debt burden shrinks massively. The public eats inflation, the government gets the relief, and all of this isn't a theory, it's already being executed. Congress is pushing supportive legislation. The executive branch is building the reserves. Central banks around the world are moving out of dollars at record speed. BRICS nations are openly preparing for a post-dollar era. The U.S. is simply setting up to reset first, so the reset happens on their terms. The crisis buildup begins in 2026. The revaluation trigger hits around 2027. By then, it's too late to reposition. Because the truth is, once this machinery is fully in motion, there's no way to jump into it afterward without paying a painful price. You can't wait until Bitcoin is at 300,000 to start thinking. You can't wait until gold breaks 10,000 before you consider diversifying. And you absolutely cannot wait until the government announces its balance sheet revaluation to finally wake up. By then, you're already on the wrong side of the wealth transfer. And make no mistake, this is a transfer. They're not destroying the entire financial system. They're not resetting everything to zero. They're reallocating wealth from dollar earners to asset holders, from savers to strategic players, from the general public to the state. And the most dangerous part? Most people won't realize what's happening until long after their buying power is gone. Inflation doesn't hit all at once. It starts as higher grocery bills, then expensive rent, then creeping utility hikes. And people adjust. They get used to it. They normalize it. That's the trap. Silent inflation is camouflage. It hides the reset in plain sight. But underneath, the economic gears are grinding. Treasury bonds are becoming weaker collateral globally. International trade partners are quietly shifting settlement away from the dollar. Sovereign wealth funds are offloading U.S. debt faster than at any time in history. Even the Federal Reserve itself, supposedly the guardian of the dollar, is preparing alternative liquidity tools for what they call non-linear events. That's a polite way of saying when the system pops. And while the average person is scrolling through social media or hoping things return to normal, the government is laying the tracks for the single largest financial repositioning since the end of the gold standard. Think about the sequence. They legalize and formalize Bitcoin at a strategic level. They position gold as a national security asset again. They accumulate both, slowly and quietly. They hint at new valuation frameworks. Foreign central banks exit U.S. debt. Inflation remains sticky. The dollar weakens across multiple asset comparisons. Then one day, the government announces an accounting update, and everything changes in one move. Not chaos, not collapse. A controlled demolition where the outcome is already predetermined. And here's the twist most people miss. The government wants a weaker dollar. Not worthless, just weaker. A softer dollar makes U.S. exports cheaper. It makes foreign debt holders absorb the losses instead of taxpayers. It reduces the real value of interest payments. It lifts asset prices, which boosts tax revenue, and it pushes the public toward a digital dollar where every transaction is traceable. This isn't a random reaction to a crisis. It's a long-term strategy. If you look at the pattern, you'll see it clearly. During World War I, debt up, gold price adjusted. During the Great Depression, gold confiscated, revalued. During World War II, debt exploded, dollar redesigned. During the 1970s, gold window closed, inflation soared. During the 2008 crisis, debt soared, money printing normalized. During COVID, debt doubled again, inflation unleashed. And now we are entering the inevitable final stage, the revaluation era. Every major debt cycle in U.S. history has ended the same way. The government changes the definition of money. And this time, the definition will shift toward scarce assets, digital and physical, that they have already been gathering behind the scenes. So the question becomes, where does that leave you? Because if you're relying on cash, if you're relying on savings, if you're relying on fixed income, you're holding the asset the government plans to shrink. You're holding the liability side of their strategy. This is why high net worth individuals, hedge funds, family offices, and sovereign funds are loading up on hard assets. This is why banks themselves, ironically, are buying record levels of gold. This is why institutional custody platforms for Bitcoin are exploding. This is why BlackRock created a Bitcoin ETF and then quietly bought billions in the first 60 days. They know what's coming. They've seen this playbook before, and they are already positioned to benefit. Now, here's the brutal truth. The government isn't going to warn you. The banks aren't going to warn you. Wall Street isn't going to warn you, because they need the public to hold the melting asset dollars, while the wealthy and institutional players hold the rising assets, Bitcoin and gold. For this mechanism to work, someone has to be on the losing side. And historically, it's always the people who waited. So when the U.S. revalues its reserves, whether gradually through market manipulation or suddenly through policy, your financial outcome depends entirely on whether you understood the signs beforehand. And one of the biggest signs is already flashing. The U.S. has begun quietly realigning the dollar's position in global trade. Oil contracts are shifting. BRICS nations are running settlement experiments without the dollar. The EU is talking about a digital euro backed by reserves. China is building gold-backed trade credit systems. Even Africa is beginning to bypass Western currencies. And the U.S., they are preparing the counterpunch, a digital dollar backed by Bitcoin and gold valuations with the power to reset the financial scoreboard in one sweep. But here's the irony. Most Americans think this is a conspiracy theory until after it happens. Just like in 1933, just like in 1971, just like in 2008, just like in 2020. When the reset hits, it will be framed as a move to stabilize the economy, a necessary modernization, a step forward in financial security, a restructuring for global competitiveness. And if you're not positioned, you get squeezed. If you're prepared, you get launched. Because in every reset, a small percentage of people walk away dramatically wealthier, not because they were smart, but because they understood the pattern. And that pattern is unfolding right now.